Hello, folks, and welcome to Author Adjacent, a show about the journey from hobbyist writer to professional author. I'm your host, Michael Vadney, and today we are going to be sitting with Kaden Love, co-host of the Love and Lore show on YouTube, the author of the Paladins of the Harvest series, and now of this week, by the time this episode comes out, the newly released Toothsucker. Welcome back to the show, Kaden. Hey,
Thank you for having me back.
perfect.
Yeah,
Oh
it's
no,
nice
put
to
that
have
back
a
up there.
physical.
Let them see a good view of it.
There is that nice physical copy, and I think some people might like that this one, even though I like writing big epic fantasy, this one's only around like 300 pages, but it's nice to have something kind of around this size that's just easier to consume.
Yeah.
And there's always just something surreal about holding something you wrote and then looking at it, and you're like, wow, I did that.
Oh, I think that's absolutely stunning. Since last time that we talked, actually, last time you were on the show, you had your first book out, Elegy of a Fragmented Vineyard. You were about to release Duet of
Mhm.
Pernicious Eels. And was Toothsucker even a thought in your mind at that point?
Yeah, so I really like as an author the drafting phase.
Hmm.
So that's really where I find a lot of fun. Editing can be a lot, and also, I don't like just being sit. I don't like a lot of idle time, and so the it was around October. No, it was around August last year. I sent my final manuscript to my editor for the final edits of Duet.
Hmm.
And I was on vacation in Oregon, and on the road, I bust out the first 3,000 words of Toothsucker. And the idea was
Nice.
to write this entire book and it was kind of like the NaNoWriMo idea, where try to do a book in a month, end up taking about 2 months. Um, but I wanted to write a book in the time while Duet was being edited. So I had the first draft done. I think I went through first little bit of edits, and so that's kind of the weird thing that I feel like a lot of authors try to shoot for one, maybe two books a year. And
Hmm.
yeah, so you see why it makes a little more sense that even though Duet came out in February, I'm coming right out again with another book.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of the plan. That uh, as I said, this is a shorter book. It's around 300 pages, whereas Duet is twice the size of that. I like to have my big epic fantasy, and in between, try to do novellas. Or right now, I'm trying to hit through this series. The idea is just doing longer series with shorter books, and it's fun to just kind of jump around to different genres.
Oh, I agree, and especially for reading as well, because it does get kind of tiring, I assume, for also writing, doing those big door stoppers back to back to back. It's nice
Mhm.
to dig into a shorter book where you can just really kind of just devour an adventure in a few days and be like, wow, that was a crazy adventure. Let's find another one.
Yeah,
So that's
and
always really fun to do.
that's exactly it. And I've been in a really big sci-fi mood as of late. A lot of it started when I got into a lot of cyberpunk books when I was trying to research the market for Toothsucker, because it is a
Hmm.
cyberpunk book. And then I got into some harder science fiction and have just been really doing a lot of that. And so while I'm really working on book three of Paladins, I'm kind of doing just a little bit a day while most of my focus is on Toothsucker 2, because that's just what I'm really enjoying right now.
Yeah.
I think a lot of authors probably do that, work with what you can at the moment, just because I feel really inspired to do these stories now and keep working on the outline for Paladins 3 and working on it occasionally so that I can get that one out hopefully early next year, while I'm hoping to have another Toothsucker book out this year.
Wow, that is really impressive. You seems to be running at like a breakneck speed between these two series. You mentioned earlier about everyone or a lot of authors trying to get like one or two books out a year. And I think that's
Hmm.
definitely ideal, but you just seem to be crushing it. Um, actually, something I did want to ask you now that you do have three books out, has your writing process really changed since your debut to afford yourself the ability to churn out these books so quickly?
Yeah, so Elegy was definitely the hardest book to write for me,
Hmm.
just because it went through so much change. Um, my editor was so amazing and so patient with me during that first book because it is completely changed. It's half the size. And when I went into book two, I was just so much more comfortable in the world. I knew much more how to write characters, do exposition without world dumping. And so that when I got to Toothsucker, which is rather than the third person multi POV that Paladins is, this one is a first
Yeah.
person single POV that I could just really bust that out. And it was so nice to see because the final letter my editor sent me after Toothsucker was done. This one only had minor, just line and copy edits, no developmental comments.
Oh, that's
Whereas
awesome.
the other books had a little more. And she just said, "I want you to go look at the manuscript you sent me the first day of Elegy." And she said, "You were even a good writer then, but just to look at what you have now is completely different." And so I'm really happy with Elegy as it is now and that it wasn't published as I first wrote it. So
Yeah.
it's just become a lot smoother, you know. I I get an easy feeling with I know how I want my characters to work, and especially now that Toothsucker 1 is done, it's kind of similar how Paladins is. I'm comfortable with these characters, the world. I know things that need to happen. And I think one of the reasons why Toothsucker was really easy was because it's a futuristic setting and I can make that all up, even though that uh Paladins is like a fantasy in a world of its own. You still have to
Yeah.
kind of hold to the rules of no technology, they speak a certain way, whereas most of the characters in Two Suckers speak with a modern slang that I've made up. I love not having constraints on that. Like I can have my characters speak with horrible grammar, and it's just
Hmm.
because that's the world they live in.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Hmm.
Um, So going into writing a duet of pernicious eels and just doing a follow up to your debut in general, what would you say is like the biggest thing that you did learn that changed your writing? Like, what was the change? Like mechanically, did you outline a different process, or did you find a different rhythm that made your writing easier to get down onto the page? I'm kind of curious what kind of changes you did make.
Hmm. I think a lot of the changes were it just really focusing a lot on characters as well. That
Hmm.
is one of the things that I think people might notice with Elegy is that it is much more plot driven than some people might like. Just because that is generally what I prefer as a reader. So
Hmm.
I was really able to bring characters more to life in the next book. Um, and after people read book one, I can kind of see what they liked, which direction to go.
Yeah.
And one of the good things is about a second book is that if you are doing a sequel, you have the whole world introduced, so you can introduce more concepts, more characters without overwhelming them. um, Book one has three point of views, whereas book two has six. But
Wow.
the newer characters aren't ones you're unfamiliar with. They're ones you've already met before in book one. And so it's just kind of fun to work with that. Um, but I think that that is a lot of it. Outlining, I kind of went with the same process. I think that kind of a skeletal outline where I have bits and pieces that I knew I need to hit. Um, and it's kind of an interesting thing with book two is because I'm hoping that this is going to turn out as a trilogy, and then I
Yeah.
hope to explore that world maybe in some other form, just like Brandon Sanderson did with Mistborn. But uh, it's just kind of an interesting idea. Whereas book one, you want a lot of enjoyable story setup. Book two is kind of the bridge to the big conclusion. And
Mhm.
I think that that's one of my favorite things. I think that Duet is a much better book than Elegy, and the people that have read it loved it more. And I was so relieved to hear that because I know a lot of people suffer from the sophomore slump that people have, where it's like
Yeah.
it's the dreary part where you're building up to the big conclusion, and just being to really go free and, like I said, bring characters to life more was something that I feel like I really learned how to do. And it's one of those things you just have to kind of imagine them as real people, what they would say, and a lot of that came from reading experience.
Hmm.
I think Joe Abercrombie's one of the best character writers out there, and I read all of his
Yes.
books in between writing these. So when I got to those, I knew how to write even horrible characters, like bad people that you
Yeah.
like he does.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, reading other people's writings, I say it all the time. It's the second best way to learn to write. And the first, obviously, being writing. And you
Hmm.
learn so much by writing your debut. It makes sense that you would be able to capture all of that and put it into a sequel and even a new series. But that's
Hmm.
really interesting. I'm excited to. I haven't had a chance to get into Pernicious Eels yet, but I'm
Hmm.
excited to get back to it, especially with all the character work that you're saying that you're doing.
Yeah.
Because I love a good plot, but I sink my teeth into a good
Yeah.
character. Uh,
Yeah, and I think it was just really fun to see because my favorite character to write in
hmm,
book one was Aerie, and just seeing her
uh,
character growth in there, and then what it becomes in book two was just one of those things where, like, yeah, it's nice to look back and, like I said, just to see that physical stack of paper and be like, I did that, but to look at
yeah.
how this character's grown because it's so hard to understand in the moment, and you can even plot it out as perfect as possible, but it's in the end you see, like, did things click? And then
Hmm.
finally, even if you're confident in it, you got to wait until readers read it, and when people are like, yeah, you brought me to tears at the end of that, I love what you did, and it was just like, oh,
Oh,
finally, it's such a relief.
that's awesome. You're touching on this question a little bit, so I'm just going to bring it up now.
Mhm.
Is there a particular way that reader feedback influenced your writing as you continued through these books? Like, is there a particular comment or something that just kept coming up where you're like, okay, I see what you're talking about. I can make that change.
Mhm. um I think a lot of it was definitely working with my editor and my early readers for Fenrir in book one, just seeing that
Hmm.
he was a very stiff character, and learning where to kind of like draw the flexibility, how to utilize character weaknesses. It was really funny because my editor told me like she hated Fenrir in the beginning, which is kind of interesting because he's like he is sort of the main character in the series, and
Hmm.
taking his weaknesses and utilizing them. So where he fails, you don't want the reader to hate that. You want them to see why he fails, why he can't do certain things like that. And I think that probably the best thing is when like my wife is one of my earliest readers, and just
Makes
having
sense.
early eyes on dialogue, because that's one of the things that so when people say, you go write it, you can read it, and then reading aloud is another way to do it. But
Hmm.
I work at a pretty breakneck pace, so I don't go and reread all my books. And it's kind of interesting that, I mean, I do reread them, but I don't
Yeah.
go do a whole draft of um,
Of like
just
reading
reading
it
them
out loud to
aloud.
yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. It takes
But
forever.
I did do something similar, which is it's difficult for people that don't have the budget, but doing an audiobook. Um,
Hmm.
because I got my book out to ARC readers at the same time I was doing the audiobook. So that's my proofreading stage. Um,
Hmm.
I love my narrator. I think he does such an amazing job, but the same is probably as it would be if I'm reading the book. It feels like I'm listening to myself talking, even though someone else is doing it. They're my
Yeah.
words. It is painful and grueling to me. So I have to like do other things while doing it because it's just like,
Yeah.
ugh, I don't like it. It's like watching a video of yourself talking. Um, but that has been so, so good. So that if people have the patience to sit and read their book out loud, you can see where there's little weaknesses and stuff because he'd
Yeah.
say things and I'd just be like, that's not right. And the book's not published yet. I've got a month or two, and so I can make the change there. And so that was
Interesting.
super, super helpful. And I think that that's one of the things that, that reader feedback is so, so valuable because you can have
Hmm.
a perfectly written book, but you can still have clunky dialogue that you might see as good until someone points it out, being like, this didn't really flow well.
Yeah. There's so much about putting words to the page where it's like it's a perfect idea here and you think you have it perfect like translated one to one on the page, but you never
Mhm.
know until you have someone else reading it.
Exactly.
So you brought up listening to your audiobook narrator read it out loud and then making changes. Do you then have to send them the changes so that they can do an updated recording of that section?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that you have to do regardless for an audiobook
Oh.
because so I did it through ACX, which is the Audible system.
Mhm.
So my narrator, thankfully, he works at a really fast pace. So he'll just get me the chapter, and it has this little dashboard where you listen to chapter after chapter. And there are times where it's not even my mistake. Like there were a couple times where he repeated a line and it was
Mhm.
just it was a little mistake. Or early on when we were working together, maybe he pronounced a name wrong or gave a character certain voice that I felt like didn't work with them.
Yeah.
So it's super nice where I just when we got into book two, he knew how all the characters spoke, and I gave them a good explanation of the newer characters. So I would just give him a little timestamp being like, you said
Mhm.
this, change it to this. And like even in the end, I gave him a huge list of probably like 20 changes, and within the same day he just did. It's like, oh, there, done. Um, so
Gotta
I
love
I can't
that.
say that that's for every narrator, but he really helped me with it.
Well, that's super cool. It's good to get those insights because audiobooks in general are just taking up more and more of the market as things go along. Like
Hmm.
even myself, I would say maybe 2 3 years ago my split was probably around 50-50, whether I was reading something digitally or on paper or doing
Hmm.
audiobook, but now it's probably closer to like 99% is mostly audiobook, and I just don't have the time to sit down and read things as much as I used to, and a lot of people run into that.
Oh, I agree completely. And I mean, as a writer, I need to read. Like I treat that as my study, but
Yeah.
time at home is usually spent writing or doing stuff with family, friends, etc., or doing the business side of things. So most of my physical book reading is downtime outside of the house and things like that. Whereas I run every day, I have my to and from work, and I'll grind through audiobooks there. And
Yep.
my wife's an artist; she does not read books physically, just because she doesn't really care to. And
Hmm.
her work is doing art, so it's like she's able to accomplish so much more while she does it. And it's super interesting talking to people just about their opinions on audiobooks because there's some people that the narrator can be a make or break thing.
It does make a difference. Like
Yeah.
it influences the reader's experience with your book, which a lot of times can elevate it and sometimes it doesn't.
Hmm. And I think it's really interesting to look at books like Dungeon Crawler Carl, that I'm
Yeah.
sure the paperback and the hardcover sales are doing really wonderfully. I mean, you can find it in a bookstore now, but you
Yeah.
look at the Audible reviews and they are
Oh my god.
insane for a an independently published book that's now a hybrid.
Yeah.
But just because he puts wonderful sound effects, it's brilliant narration. And
Mhm.
now that there are apps like Libby, where I actually do most of mine through the library thing that they do, or Audible actually has a decent library for in their subscription without credits. So
Oh,
you
yeah.
just talk to so many people now that aren't readers, but like they would say they're not readers, but they listen to audiobooks all the time. And
Mhm.
I noticed that was something really big that I got a lot more readers, you could say, for Elegy once I had the audiobook out there. And it's just interesting to kind of see how people take it in. And
Mhm.
thankfully, like I said, I have a great narrator. I really like his work.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just another thing to add to the business model.
Yeah, that's Sound Booth Studio is the group that does the books for Dungeon Crawler Carl, and like Jeff Hayes, the main narrator of that series, has become, I want to say, like an audiobook superstar because of just how
Hmm.
well he did Dungeon Crawler Carl. I actually just finished Time Marked Warlock by, I'm gonna
Uh-huh.
butcher her name, Shami Stovall.
Yeah, I've
Uh,
seen the book that he did it. Yeah, but I haven't read it.
I would definitely encourage you to check it out. It's the performance is really good and the story is really good, but just audiobooks in general and finding a good narrator is also a way that other people find your books, because there have been times where I will check out a book just because I'm like, oh, I like that narrator, I want to listen to that person tell me another story, I'm going to check out this book. So partnering with a really strong narrator can make a huge difference for your book.
Oh, 100%. Like that book that you were just mentioning, the Time Mark Warlock, like I've
Yep.
looked at it because of the narrator. Same with books that Stephen
Yeah.
Pacey did or Michael Kramer, just because I've loved their performances in other ones. And
Hmm.
it's just like, okay, if this book is quality to me and quality enough that their narrator would do it, the other book they did is probably, of same quality out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Michael Kramer and Kate Redding have got me to listen to a lot of different books that I had never heard before until I saw their name on it. They're
Exactly. Like
definitely a
I
boon.
honestly don't know how many I it'd be fun to calculate how many days of my life I've spent listening to their voices because I did all of Wheel of Time with them. Uh
Yeah.
I did
So
some of the
many Brandon
Stormlight books
Sanderson books.
and then yeah, exactly. It just those two have they've been around for a while doing a lot of good ones.
Yeah. So you mentioned your wife and how she's an artist, and she did the cover for the Paladins of the Harvest series, correct?
Hmm.
Did she also do the cover for Toothsucker as well?
Yeah, and I think it's kind of funny because not only in this cover, but a lot of people comment that a lot of people have commented that the main character on the front looks kind of like me, and that's something you'll notice.
Ah,
And a lot of my wife's just art that she does for fun is that a lot of the guys just look kind of like me.
yeah. Well,
But it,
she's
it was
looking at
really
you
fun.
every day.
Exactly, and that's it. And it was really fun to work with. So Paladins was really fun to do with her. I think some of the things were up her alley with that one. And
Mhm.
she does like vampire books. Toothsucker is her favorite of mine that I've written. But as you can tell, it's a pretty gruesome and eye-catching cover. And she
Yeah.
prefers to do a lot of pretty girls in dresses, cozy, romantic things like that. And so it was
Yeah.
kind of challenging to do it. And so, but I mean, she did a fantastic job because we kind
Oh,
of worked on the cover ideas a little bit. And so we've got this, and then we have a girl that is essentially like the K-pop star of the world that
mhm.
she had fun drawing. But then this one, it's kind of subtle there, but it's a cyborg dolphin, and that is
Yes, I've seen it in the digital copies of it. I'm
yeah,
very curious about what's gonna be happening with that. But
uh-huh.
yeah, let's move on to talking more about Toothsucker then.
Mhm.
What can you tell the people about the book? Like, what is it about?
Yeah. So it's really interesting because so the easy pitch I give for people is that it is Red Rising meets cyberpunk edge runners with tooth eating vampires. So to kind of elaborate
Good
on that a
comps.
little more, I really got into cyberpunk because of the anime Cyberpunk Edge Runners. One
Mm,
season, I loved it so much. It's a lot about a character's chain of justifications that descends into his destruction, and it has
mhm.
a brilliant romance in it. I knew I needed to write something with romance because that is my wife's favorite genre, and that is something she always asks for more of in there. So
Yeah.
that kind of the tones there and just the feelings of that world really kicked me off in writing this book. And then I say Red Rising because in Red Rising, you have this hierarchy of people based on the colors that they are. And the world of Toothsucker is really interesting because it focuses a lot on something that I call physical light. The idea is that
Mhm.
light is the power, it's what powers things, it is uh, the currency, it is weaponized, and it is just stuff like that. Whereas the world is organized in the color spectrum. You have the
Mm.
red, which is the lowest, and that is like pure wasteland. You go to the orange, and they're all in districts. The orange district is a it is the slums, the lowest you can get, whereas the violet at the top, this is the elite of society. And it kind of goes the same way where if someone has violet light, that is worth so much more than indigo or blue. And this is something I've heard a lot of people that have read it already really love because I haven't talked about it a lot.
Yeah.
It's kind of a harder thing to explain in a few words, whereas tooth eating vampires is really eye catching. Um, and
It is.
yeah, exactly. And so that comes from the main premise of the book is that there is a disease that people are getting from cybernetic implants that causes their bones to disintegrate. It's like
Oof.
really intense osteoporosis, whereas their bones basically dissolve. Um, and so Petya, the main character, he is an immigrant that came to the Republic of Capital, which is the future United States, and
Yeah.
he is basically caught in something where he thought it was just medical testing, but he's brought in and is forced to do like espionage and assassin jobs for a company that has put a device in him that causes him to eat teeth. Um, and there's a group of other people like this where it caused that vampiric hunger because this is the only way to prevent their bones from disintegrating. So it's like a pitch at a cure, but you don't really
Yeah.
know why they're going for that and what's really happening. And the world is a future where the government is literally companies. The top
Mm.
company in the world, the president is the CEO of a company that currently has the best medication for this bone disintegrating disease. And it's about he's employed by the main character and his group. They're employed or pretty much owned by a competitor that's trying to get to the top for reasons that kind of follow. And yeah, it just gets kind of crazy from there. There's a bit of a murder
Yeah.
mystery. There's a little bit of
Oh, yeah.
everything in that
There's
short little amount.
everything in this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely fascinating. One, just
Hmm.
vampires mixed with like cyberpunk. That sounds really cool. The unique
Hmm.
blend of where I guess that's where Toothsucker comes in is the
Yeah.
fact that they're eating the teeth.
Hmm.
I do love to hear that there is going to be like a prominent romance into this too, because
Hmm.
I am actually a huge romance lover. I do love a good romance tale. One of my favorite ones actually is the subplot in the second era Mistborn books
Hmm.
between Astaire and Waxillian. I
Hmm.
love their relationship and how it turns out. But
Yeah.
something else that Toothsucker is reminding me of with the lights and everything. I don't know if we talked about this last time. Did you ever check out the Lightbringer series by Brent Weeks?
Not yet, but is it kind of like that? Is that
Um, the magic system is completely light based, and where
okay?
everybody who does magic has like one or multiple variations of the colors, and they do different things.
Huh.
Also, a great story with a fantastic romance subplot, very much like Waxillian and Astera. But yeah, you're definitely like plucking all the right heartstrings for me that make me want to read this book. So very fascinating
Yeah.
so far. So,
Yeah.
what
That's super
gave
cool.
you the idea to do this vampire cyberpunk? So you had the TV show, sorry, what was it called? Cyberpunk.
Cyberpunk Edge Runners. So
That
it's
one.
kind of like a spin on. I guess it technically comes from the world of Cyberpunk 2077, which is a video game that I haven't even played, but it's
Yeah.
just a one season story that I just really loved.
Okay. Yeah, I remember you were posting online about, hey, vampires are still cool, right? I love them. What do you guys think? Like
Yeah.
months ago.
Uh-huh.
And then eventually Toothsucker started coming out. I'm like,
Uh-huh.
oh, I see what you're doing there, Caden. How did
Yeah.
vampires come into that tale?
Yeah, so that's really the interesting thing. So a lot of the blend of vampires and cyberpunk, the cyberpunk side came from just what I was really into at the time when I started writing it.
Hmm.
Back in college, I was in a creative writing course and I wrote a short story actually called Toothsucker.
Ah,
And this one was it was 1,000 words. and I'm actually planning on releasing it on like a newsletter or something, because it's just a fun little story where it starts off with pretty much how Toothsucker starts off about describing in a gruesome way our main character eating teeth. And in that
Nice.
one, just I love the shocking beginnings. You know, it's the same thing I did in Elegy.
I've
I want to grip
noticed.
people right off the bat. But I that one, you know, it starts off with a guy going and pulling teeth out, and I think one of the interesting implications of vampires is the moral side of it. You know, what if you have a vampire that is trying to be a good person that doesn't like
Mhm.
that, and that's the predicament that goes there. You know, the guy finishes feeding, he goes back to their little vampire place. This is set in like a fantasy era, and he's talking with his ally and saying, you know, we got to figure out a way to do this differently. And he said, what if we tell people that, you know, to hide the teeth they lose under their pillows? And it turns out to be, you know, a play on the Tooth Fairy origin story. Um, and so that
Love
idea,
that.
yeah, it was just a fun little thing that I didn't think I would ever do anything with. Um, but the idea really stuck with me. Like I said, the moral implications that come with a vampire story, I was really interested in doing something.
Mhm.
And so I eventually, just while I was writing, it was probably while I was writing Duet, I just at work would just jot down little bits here and there of a fantasy Toothsucker. It
Mhm.
started off kind of in a similar way, similar themes. Um, and I maybe wrote 2 or 3 chapters of that and just kind of put it on the side. And I really wanted to jump back into it, but then I was like, what if I do this cyberpunk? Like I said, I was very into
Mhm.
cyberpunk at that time, and that's just kind of how it started. I just went full throttle. I had I I had kind of set up the story. I was doing some outlining while I was finishing Duet, and like I said, right as I sent it to my editor, I just hammered out 3,000 words and then just kept up with that on vacation. Got home and finished it before I got the rest of Duet back to do the final check.
Wow. Yeah, your speed is incredible to me, so I'm very impressed.
Mhm.
Did you find a lot of difficulty in switching from not necessarily like one to one typical fantasy, but moving from a traditional fantasy setting to a cyberpunk setting, or was that transition smooth for you?
Yeah, I think it was fairly smooth, but it's something I'll still catch myself on. So days where I try to write a little in Paladins 3 and Toothsucker 2, I'll find myself accidentally writing, you know, whereas Toothsucker is a I did this, um,
Hmm.
I did that, and sometimes I'll start writing in third person, and I'm like, oh wait, got to backtrack that.
Yeah.
And I think that that was honestly the biggest difficulty, was just really going to the different tones. Like I said, with being able to give my character slang, having a huge freedom, and then going back to Paladins, have to be more strict with my language, making it sound more refined.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's not too difficult. It's just you have to really put your head in a whole new mode.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And it
Hmm.
sounds like it was really the right move to move from a third person limited to a first person because it really bumps up a lot of the things that you were saying, like trying to be more character driven. A first person story is perfect for that. You wanted
Hmm.
to do something that was a little faster, a little shorter. I don't know if this is true universally, but I have definitely noticed that in reading all the books that I do, that the first person narratives with a single character always tends to be a shorter, fast paced adventure. I don't know why that is. I'm definitely here for it. So yeah, it seems like it was a solid choice for you.
Yeah, and that's how I feel too. Because if you look at any multi POV book, it is essentially multiple single character stories, even if it's told from third person, kind of intermingled with each other.
Yep.
Because you can look at a single plot line in one of my Paladins books, and you know, it's you have a little bit and then a break, little bit and a break. Whereas, like, you know, the whole story might be 100 pages or something. Whereas this one is all dedicated to one character, so I can move a lot quicker and just go at that breakneck pace. Where the other ones are more of a slow burn, really
Hmm.
setting things up from all different angles. I think that was something really nice to focus on, that I didn't have to. really go and check, okay, where was this character before? And especially not really focusing as much on Paladins 3 now as I am on Toothsucker 2. I'll find
Hmm.
myself having to go back and reread my chapter summaries that I wrote, sometime even go reread whole chapters because my mind's been out of that character's mind for so long. Whereas this one, it's just, I always know where we're going. Even if I have a break for a couple days from writing it, I can just go read
Yeah.
and see, oh, that's where we are right there. Don't have to remember too much else.
I'm actually kind of curious. At what stage in the writing process do you start creating or using these chapter narrations? Because that was something I didn't start doing until I want to say draft 3 or 4, and I was like, this is so much easier for finding what happens in each chapter is by just having a
Mhm.
quick little 2 to 4 sentence paragraph about like, oh hey, this is what this chapter is about, so you don't have to read the whole thing to remember this is the one where you did that thing. At what stage
Mhm.
did you start doing that?
So I actually did that from the beginning. And
Ah,
all of
smart.
that came from when I started reading Stormlight.
Hmm.
There's big gaps between those books. So it had been so long between Words of Radiance when I started to read Oathbringer that rather than go and reread those 1,000 word books again, I went and reread every single chapter summary for the first few books. And that's something that I kind of continue today. Like I'm reading Malazan right now. And if there
Ooh,
is a chapter that I don't really remember, I'll just go read the chapter summary. And so it is more of a me thing. I love when there is a book that's big enough to have a wiki where I can just go reread the chapter summaries
I
so I can have a
love a
quick
good
reminder.
wiki.
And that's the same thing that I'm doing here. It's that I recognize that my memory isn't the best. So I need to just make those reminders so that I can go back and see. And then when I go back for the second draft, I can kind of double check to see where things end up and where I was and
Hmm.
so forth.
That especially makes sense when you're going through those big door stoppers and those huge series where it's making a callback to like 3 4 books ago, and you're like, I don't know if I caught that one, and you have to go back
Oh,
and figure
yeah.
out what the heck they're talking about. So you're going through Malazan right now. One, very brave of you. I have yet to do it. I'm honestly a little scared because
Hmm.
I've heard so many good things about it, but I'm also just a little intimidated by it, by
Hmm.
what people have said.
Hmm.
Um, how are you finding the experience so far?
So I'm on the sixth book. And like I said,
Oh, wow.
I don't do a ton of I do read print a lot,
Yeah.
but Malazan books take me about 2 months because there are rarely days where I'll read like 50 pages. Most of it is just like downtime, 20 pages, something like that. Whereas
Hmm.
like, a really good day, probably read 50 to 70, and that's even a lot for me. So the difficulty with Malazan for me is that there will be times, like I said, where I forget. These are big, long books, and it might have been like
Hmm.
last month that I read this super significant event. Um, and I'll just talk about it to my wife a lot because I love the series so much.
Hmm.
And even though I'm only 6 books in, like it is definitely in my top, but I'm very confident that when I finish the series, it is going to be my favorite of all time.
Wow.
Like there's just some things that he does that where your mind starts to make connections, because a lot of it has this ancient lore and history in it that when you
It's
start to
it's
piece
deep.
together, yeah, when you start to piece together things that he was talking about before, your mind just explodes. And like it just kind of similar to how Lord of the Rings is, where Tolkien will just go off on some lore randomly, and it just the subtle connections that happen, they're they're just so amazing. So yes, it is not difficult to comprehend. I would say it is just difficult to juggle everything there is. You have to go into book one knowing I'm not going to understand everything here because this is you've got a people talking about a whole history and races that you haven't been introduced to. You can go
Hmm.
look up on summaries, things about them and get a couple ideas, but it's not going to have too much. Where you have, I mean, you look at Mistborn you're talking about, you can be reading a book and it will say Khandra, and you'll be like, oh, what are Khandra? I need a refresher. Go look. You can read the whole wiki page in a few minutes, where
Yeah.
there is a race called the Talan Imas in Malazan, and that's probably a novel's worth of history of what these things are on the wiki. Like there's just so much there where they are probably the most fascinating fantasy race out there. There's just so much to them.
Oh
And
my
I that's
God.
what I love about it is I feel like there's always more to learn. Even though I do like a book that's just very upfront, you get everything right there. I'm not much of a rereader, but I can
Hmm.
definitely see the value in rereading the series, which I will eventually do.
Yeah. There is something very satisfying about diving into a world's wiki of a full series, like the 17th Shard for Brandon Sanderson. Like
Hmm.
I love that wiki, or the what is the other one called? The Copper Mind.
Hmm.
I think that's what it's called. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm always scared to go in if I haven't completed the series because I'm like,
Yes.
I'm going to accidentally see something that I don't want to see, and I'm going to be upset with myself because I have no one to blame but me. So
Uh-huh.
I'm always very cautious.
Yeah, that one is you definitely have to be careful there. And now that I'm caught up on all the Sanderson stuff, it is fun to go look back. And I mean, you can
Yeah.
even go, it is crazy how like in depth his fans are because you can look at a character, go to the bottom of the page, and they'll even have notes from like things that he said in Q&As that they're like, oh, this is canon because he said
Yeah.
it there. And it's in no book at all. It is just something he said. And it's like, wow, there's so much to explore there. And all of the fun Cosmere connections, I think, are really what makes me love Malazan because there
Yeah.
are so many things like that that you'll be like, oh, no way, just your mind's blown so many times.
Yeah. Malazan fans are very enthusiastic about the series. So I
That is,
imagine
yeah,
the wiki is very extensive as well.
uh-huh.
Um, but yeah, it is a very polarizing series, and I know I'm gonna try it eventually. But
Hmm.
Caden, I'm scared. I got to work up that
I
courage.
I understand that, and I it is definitely not for everyone. Um,
Yeah.
I read when I finished Gardens of the Moon, book one.
Hmm.
I felt a lot better than I thought because everyone always talks, oh, it's like the most complex fantasy series. It's out there. And
Yeah.
you'll understand the story completely. It's just you're like, oh, there's just a lot of like here, 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 all over. Um,
Hmm.
and book two was great, but when I read book three, that's when things start to click, and there are just some of my favorite moments in all of fantasy there. And oh, it that was definitely the biggest inspiration for Duet. Just some of the moments in there I took from moments that inspired me in Memories of Ice, that third book. Um, and yeah, I like the idea of not having to just finish the series and be done with it. That there's a lot out
Yeah.
there. I mean, not to mention that there's 10 giant books in the main series, and then there's I think 23, 24 total, if you
Hmm.
count all the other ones in the world. And just the fact that the author is an archaeologist is just you could tell he went really in depth.
That is awesome. Well, I gotta say, you're selling me on it pretty good. Maybe I
Yeah.
will get it up next after I finish what I'm going through right now.
Hmm.
Um, but bringing it back to Toothsucker, I actually had a curious question. I saw that you put some early chapters of Toothsucker up on, I think it's called Royal Road, and I was
Hmm.
curious about your experience with that. Were you thinking to do that to get early feedback and be like, okay, maybe I can make these changes? Or was it more of a like, hey, here's a teaser, let's build some hype? And what was your experience with that?
So a lot of it actually was going off of books that have really succeeded, like Dungeon Crawler Carl, which actually got a lot of its audience from Royal Road. It is for
Ah.
people that don't know about it. It is just a web novel page where people will post continually, and a lot of authors, like He Who Fights with Monsters, is probably one of the
Hmm.
biggest success stories on there. Where this author makes most of his money from Patreon. What
Nice.
and that's kind of the idea about Royal Road is that you post chapters and you can have Patreon subscribers who can pay to get it early and get early chapters, and that's how the current Dungeon Crawler Carl works. If you are on Matt
Hmm.
Dinman's Patreon, you can get early chapters, and it's just a different way to get eyes. So I went through a lot of people that had done it, just kind of seeing how it would work. One of the things to note with that is that the most prominent genres on there are lit RPG and progression. Um,
That
it
is what I
is,
noted as well.
yeah, it's a site that is meant for quick consumption. So you
Mhm.
don't want chapters to be too long. So I've actually cut up a lot of Toothsucker's chapters as I put them on there. Um, and most authors on there that are the big successes will post 1 to 2 chapters a week, which
Mhm.
if Toothsucker, that's why I actually jumped into writing the second Toothsucker book right away, was because I wanted to keep that Royal Road going where I could do at least 1 chapter a week, even while
Mhm.
writing Paladins 3. And it's done all right. Like I've got a couple followers on the story. I'm still posting daily on it. And the idea is to kind of keep it still on there. Try having my ebook on Amazon, but not doing KU right away, just to see if it helps pull things. And then, of course, really focusing my actual release on the paperback. Um,
Mhm.
right now, it's looking like it's not getting, like, it's not doing horribly, but it's just not bringing like
Mhm.
big, huge attention because it can make a career if you really hit it off on there.
Yeah.
There are just certain stories that do really well. Um, Mine's doing okay enough. But I'll probably finish off Toothsucker on there. If it has enough attention, keep going. If not, I'll probably just do as I do with the other books.
Mhm.
Honestly, I'm really, really excited more so now about the main release just to see how it does because I think that um, this one's just going to hit people a little differently. It's easier to get into than Paladins just because that one is more of a complex fantasy. And the
It is.
fact that this does touch on romance, vampires, and cyberpunk, which are really big genres right now, I'm just hoping I can get some more light on it.
Yeah. Make a big splash with it. Well, with
Yeah.
a cover like that,
Uh huh.
I won't be surprised. Like it is very eye catching. It's very beautiful.
Hmm.
Your wife did an amazing job on it, and every time I see it coming across the feed or anywhere on the internet, it's just like your eyes are immediately drawn to it. It
Uh huh.
stands out. And then with the a name like Toothsucker, and then the unique combination of vampires and cyberpunk, you really have a lot going for this one, and I'm very excited for it to come out. Uh,
Yeah.
ah, God, sorry, you got me all hyped up for it now.
No, yeah, and I like that's the thing. I'm so excited. And with the Paladins books, the release is fun, but
Mhm.
I've really made sure to get a lot of reviewers out there, so I really had a good idea of how it was going to be received then.
Yeah,
And I think that's why a lot of people are like, "Are you nervous for the release?" It's like, no, I pretty much know what most people are going to think. Of course, you'll have the people that think it later on that it's the worst book ever, that think it's the best book ever. Um, but Two Sucker, I only have 10 reviews out on Goodreads right now. I think all but one there's one 4 star, one 3 star, the rest are 5 stars. A lot of
nice.
people just really surprised with like how it did. And that's of course really nice to hear, but noting my editor and like her experience with some of the people she's working with, her last thing she said, I want you to enter this into contests. Hearing that
Mhm.
is just like, okay, I really am excited to see where this goes. My social media following has grown since Elegy more. I mean, pitching book two is kind of hard to do to people directly,
Yeah,
for people that haven't read the book one, but this is completely out of the ordinary. You can get a whole new audience. So I'm just really interested to see what will happen in the next few months. Really excited,
that
and we'll see how it goes.
that's super awesome. Uh, we are running low on time, so I think this is actually a perfect time to end it. By the
Mhm.
time this episode comes out, Toothsucker will have been out for a little less than a week. So please tell the people, where can they find you? Where will they be able to find Toothsucker and the rest of your books?
Yep, you can find me on Instagram at Kaden Love Author. That is also my line for X/Twitter, Threads, TikTok. My Bookstagram, Svetling Press, Svetling Press. That's where I post all of my random book content. My website is Kaden R Love. and Toothsucker will be on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, just pretty much everywhere in the system.
Absolutely excellent. Thank you again for coming back onto the show. We'll hope to have you again. We'll hope to have you on again in the future.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. All right, folks. That is going to be it for us today. And have a good night.